So it's 5:05 o'clock Eastern time. So we're gonna begin our webinar today. So welcome everybody to join the college admission webinar with Signet Education. So my name is Yun Fan. I'm the host today. I work with many Chinese family and students at Signet, and also organize summer programs at top universities to offer unique educational experiences for high school students and college students. So today we have three very experienced college admission consultants to share with us the insider view of the college admission in the US. We have Molly, who has worked in undergraduate admission at the University of Pennsylvania, Case Western Reserve University, and Oberlin College, and has read and reviewed about 6,700 applications from across the United States. And we also have Sheila, who is Harvard alumni and a former trader on Wall Street. And she achieved a perfect score on the SAT and a perfect score on math section of the GRE. And she can speak 7 languages, and she has worked with many students on college admission before. We also have Jay. Jay is our CEO at Signet Education. So he has taken a broad academic path that spans the science and the humanities. So we have 3 excellent speakers today to share with us about college admission. And if you need any translation from English to Mandarin, welcome to ask anytime. 我可以帮助大家来翻译如果需要的话，英文、中文，或者是之后需要我来这个解释任何的问题，我都可以帮助大家进行。我们这一次呢有2种这个提问的方式。We have 2 ways you can ask question during the Q&A section. You can raise hand, and I'll open your microphone, okay? And you can ask your question directly to the speakers. That's one way. And also, you can see on Zoom screen, there's Q&A option, and you can type your questions on the Q&A section, so our speakers can see and can answer your question. Okay, so there's 2 ways you can ask question, and if you have a question, you're welcome to type in on Q&A or raise your hand anytime. Okay, so we have some question already submitted. So if there's no more question, we're just going to start our webinar. So I'm going to hand it to Molly, Sheila, and Jay.
Great, thank you, Yun. I'll do an introduction for Signet and then turn it over to Molly and Sheila. So I'm one of the owners and co-founders of Signet Education, a company I started right after graduating Harvard in 2005. So I've been around for about 15 years now. We're based right in Harvard Square in Cambridge, and we provide tutoring, test prep, admissions consulting, and academic coaching services, primarily for high school students. What makes us a little different than a lot of other companies is that we take a partnership approach. So a lot of companies provide one or another of these services. We partner with families from whenever they come to us and help them think about the entire educational journey, the decisions along the way, the goals that they've set, how they're going to get there, and essentially how they're going to get the most out of their educational journey. We do those services, tutoring, test prep, admissions consulting, and academic coaching, all one-on-one and all with a group of incredible educators, most of whom have some kind of Ivy League background. Just given our location, most of our tutors come from Harvard and MIT. And we are really focused on building relationships and helping students create a sense of what they want to accomplish and achieve that, and do that in a way that's sustainable and leads to long-term happiness, not just a great outcome. We work with hundreds of students every year, and as you'll learn in the presentation today, there's no magic about getting into a particular school, an Ivy League school. You have to work hard, you have to get lucky. But I will say every year we have many students who work with us, who go to the top schools, who get the top scores. So we're very experienced in that type of work. So we've got Sheila and Molly here, and we're going to try to take you through a pretty high-level look at admissions. more of an introduction. And then the floor is yours to ask questions of our incredible team. Between the two of them, Sheila and Molly, their experience is just phenomenal. They've seen pretty much every kind of case you can imagine, and they've experienced admissions from both sides of the desks. So we really have a deep understanding of admissions over the years we've been working together. And so before I hand it off, I also want to say Happy Mother's Day, first to Sheila and Molly. Thank you both. I know you have kids, so thank you both for taking time out of your precious Mother's Day to be here with us. And Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers in the audience. I'm sure there's many of them. We work with a lot of mothers who are concerned about their kids, and we help put their minds at ease. So thank you both. And I'll turn it over from here. I'm going to go to the first slide.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how competitive colleges evaluate students. And most of the selective colleges that our students are applying to utilize a system of evaluation that we call holistic evaluation in admissions. And what this means is that they're not using a formula in which to evaluate your student for admission to their university. They're looking at the entire person, the entire individual, and what he or she will be bringing to their university. So first and foremost, of course, your academics are the most important. They will look at your transcript and they want to see what kind of classes you've taken across the last 3.5 years when you apply to college. They want to see that each year that you're in school, the rigor of your courses is getting more difficult, and the success that you're having in those courses is also increasing. They're also going to be looking at your test scores. Of course, this is part of the academic performance evaluation. They want to see that what kind of testing you've taken matches up with the kind of student that they find is successful at their university. So you can often look at test averages to get a pretty good sense for this. And then the real holistic piece comes into play. The admissions office is trying to create a cohort of students in a graduating class that is very different from one another. They want this to enable the conversations in the classroom to come from very different backgrounds, very different places of experience. And so what this means is they're looking for students to come from all 50 United States. They're looking for students to come from as many countries as possible. They're looking for students that come from multi-sibling households and single-child households. They're looking for students that are coming from households where they're the first generation in their family to go on to college, and households where the students have been going to college for generations. What this also means is that they're looking to create strong roommates on campus, strong individuals who are going to be a part of their debate team, the kind of students that are going to speak up in class, those that are going to be leaders on the different athletic fields on campus. And so from year to year, this might differ for a different admissions office. Some years they're looking for field hockey players. Some years they're looking for more debate students. And other years they're also looking for that harpist. So if you are that harpist who is applying to the university that just had 3 harpists graduate and they need to fill those spots, it's your lucky year. And so when they read your admissions file, these are all the different aspects that will come into play. And how they get to this piece is through the many different requirements. And this is teacher recommendations for one. The teacher recommendations will talk to who you are as an individual in the classroom. Do you ask those questions that really propel the conversation forward? When you're unclear on a particular concept, do you admit that you're not sure and ask for additional help? Are you there to collaborate with your classmates? These are all the stories that your teachers will tell in the letters of recommendation. There's also a piece called the counselor letter of recommendation, and depending on how your school is structured, this might be a principal or a chancellor or somebody in a counselor role at the school. And their job is to talk about you within the context of your community. How do the other students in your grade look at you? How do teachers view you on campus? Are you looked at as a good friend? Are you someone who's kind to the teachers? Are you somebody who is quick to volunteer your time in the service of others? What sort of leadership qualities might you contribute? Your counselor will talk about all of these different aspects of your personality in their letters of recommendation. Finally, some of you will have the opportunity to participate in an interview. An interview is really your chance to bring to life that aspect of your personality. It can be very one-dimensional when they're evaluating your application through the computer or on paper in their admissions office. And through the interview, you're able to bring to life some of the experiences that you've had, some of your goals and ambitions, and why you might be a good fit for the university. Some universities use this in an evaluative sense, where they take that interview into consideration as to whether or not they decide to admit you. And some of them use it just as an informational piece of the process. And it's a time for them to be able to tell you a little bit about their university and get your questions answered. Either way, you need to look at this as an opportunity to put your best foot forward. And the interview is often a time when it's an opportunity for you to brag about yourself, what you've accomplished, and how you would be a wonderful asset at their university. This is sometimes hard for students to do because we're often told we need to be modest and humble and not brag about ourselves too much. But during the interview, you really need to put your best foot forward and make sure they leave knowing these are the things that this particular student will bring to our university. The one other aspect that we work very hard on here at Signet that is completely in your control is the essay. So there will be typically a common application essay. We can talk about that a little later if there are questions. And this is the essay that will go to all the different universities that you apply to. This is completely in your control. You have the opportunity to answer from 5 different prompts or create a prompt of your own. And this gives you the opportunity not only to showcase your writing abilities, but to touch upon an aspect of your personality, what you will bring to that university that you'd really like to spend a little bit more time on. Many of the universities we work with also have supplemental essays, and these can be along the lines of a why pen essay, or it could be something more specific. Tell us about a time when you faced failure and how you overcame. And you can work through each of these different prompts to, once again, set yourself forward and let the university know what different aspects of your ambitions and goals might match up with their own. The one piece that I might say that is less important within the whole admissions realm for selective and competitive admissions might be financial aid. So as you begin to look at less selective admissions, they do consider a family's ability to pay as part of the admissions process. But as you get into the more competitive admissions schools, more selective, the Ivy League universities and such, the family's ability to pay does not come into play. So there's no advantage to not having to apply to for financial aid in those contexts. So how do the admissions officers read your application? First and foremost, as I mentioned, they are going to be reviewing your transcript or your report card. They are going to look at the context in which you have been studying over the last 4 years. So your school will be sending along what we call a profile to all of the admissions offices. The profile will talk about how many students are in your graduating class. It will talk about how many students go on to university in the United States, perhaps, and how many stay in your home country to study. It will also talk about the variety of different courses that are offered at the school. Now, the admissions office will compare your transcript to what is offered at your school. And as I mentioned earlier, they're looking to see that you're taking an incredibly rigorous curriculum at that school. So for some, that may be AP courses. For some, that might mean IB courses. For some, it might be a different method of evaluation. But we will use that guide, often referred to as a cheat sheet, to compare what you've done to what's offered at your school. And as I said, we hope to see that each year you've gotten more rigorous with your curriculum and that your grades have gotten stronger and stronger. This guide will also tell us how your grades are evaluated at your school. Some schools are on a 4.0 scale, some are 5.0. A lot of colleges out there will then re-evaluate the grades into their own particular system of evaluation so that everyone is on the same playing field. But that varies from school to school, and certainly not something that you should worry about, but just so that you're aware, this is something that commonly happens. The other aspects of the application that will come in, as I mentioned, are going to be the SAT scores or ACT scores. Some of the universities out there do encourage you to take the SAT-2 subject tests. There are no universities in the United States that any longer require the SAT-2 subject tests. They have eliminated that requirement because of everything that's going on in the world right now. However, if a university does highly encourage you to take the SAT-2s, highly encouraging means I should do this. And depending on the specific major that you're interested in studying, we can work together to figure out what SAT-2 subject tests might be the best fit for you and your ambitions when it comes to college. Now, those SAT-2s, in case you aren't aware, are typically offered on the same Saturdays that the SATs are offered. And they're typically about 1 hour long, and so you can take 3 of them on a Saturday. So an admissions office will take that data, the academic data, and then they will look at all the holistic aspects of your application. They will read through that, create a summary, and then they will bring it to admissions committee. And when you're in admissions committee, this is your chance to really talk about the application. And you're talking to a number of your colleagues that are sitting around a table. So all of those colleagues, depending on the school, will either need to come into agreement about whether or not to admit you, to deny you, to waitlist you, or defer you, depending on the time of year. And sometimes they might even put your application aside and say, you know what, I think we need a little bit more information on this applicant before we can make a final decision. And that might mean picking up the phone and calling someone at your school to talk about you. It might mean calling someone or emailing them, depending on the time zone that they're in, somebody who's had an opportunity to meet with you. So this could be a coach or a teacher or even the person that interviewed you. And then once they have that final information, they can go forward with making that decision. At this point in time, admissions officers do notify you digitally through your email usually, or a portal, of the ultimate decision that you've received. And if it ends up being one that you're not happy with, again, if it's a waitlist or a deferral, we can work with you to try and turn that into an offer of admission. But one of the things about this process that is sometimes difficult for families to understand is that there is no magic bullet. There's no easy way to create an application that is going to automatically get you accepted into these universities, because we are not sitting around that admissions table from year to year to know what it is they're exactly looking for, whether it's that harpist one year and then the next year it's looking for members of their debate team. So we control as much as we can from this side of the desk.
All right, thanks, Molly. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the tactics and strategies that you should be thinking about as you do apply and get yourself prepared to be a very strong candidate for the colleges that you're going to target. So these are some basic principles that I think are really important for everyone to know, and I'll talk a little bit in more detail about each of them. The first thing is there is nothing better than the truth. You are a unique and talented individual. It's your job to sort of figure out what those talents are and, strengthen them, amplify them, and help them shine through in your application through the various things that you're going to do, the things that Molly talked about, your extracurricular activities, your interactions with other students and teachers, what you put in your essay, and even the choice of schools that you apply to can really reflect what kind of person you are. And again, there's no benefit to faking it. And of course, there are ethical concerns about that as well. So it's best to be 100% yourself. And if you are not yet, even if you are a junior, you still have time to shape yourself into the kind of person you want to be and really create a good vision for yourself of who you want college to help you become. And that can be an important part of your application as well. So strive to make yourself into an awesome person. As I said, you all have your own unique talents. It would behoove you to figure out what some of those are. Discover your own personal superpower. superpowers, and really double down on them by pursuing more knowledge in certain subject areas that you are very interested in, getting involved in activities that will help you explore future careers or even hobbies that you're passionate about, meeting like-minded people, and using those relationships to help you become a more fully self-realized person. And all of these things will help you become a really great applicant to any college that you want to apply to. So reflect a little bit and think about the areas of your life that you want to improve on or change, or even downplay if there are bad habits that you want to stop doing. Now is the time to think about doing that. It's important to do well academically. As Molly mentioned, these are things that are very important to colleges: your grades, how you behave in your classrooms, your test scores, if those are considered. And all of that is very important. Of course, you want to do as well as you possibly can, but it's important also for United States universities to see you as a well-rounded person, not just someone who lives in their books or only focuses on school. It's important that you have meaningful relationships with your peers, with your teachers, with your family. It's important that they see you giving back to your community and having some sort of engagement outside of your school bubble. You know, community service, volunteer work, things like that can be very important. Also, having interests of your own that are not dictated by your schoolwork are important signs that you will be a person who joins their campus and enhances it by bringing your own interests and passions and activities to the campus and making it a more vibrant place for other students. So think about things that are not necessarily academic or career related that you are interested in becoming better at or doing more of, and consider adding that into your profile as well. Apply smart is a really important one. I think we all feel the stress and pressure of college applications, and we know that that can lead people to push themselves in ways that are not actually going to help them in their chances of getting accepted to a college. So things that fall under this category are: think about the number of schools that you should apply to. At Signet, we recommend 8 to 12 schools maximum. We also say you should apply to a diverse list of schools. So every school on your list should be a place that you would be thrilled to go to. You can study what you want to study, be around people that you want to be around, have the experiences that you really feel are necessary for you to take that next step in your life and your career. But they should have different levels of selectivity. So this is something that you can look up very easily on, Big Future, which is a College Board website, or any number of college research websites. You can see the admissions rate for each college. And you don't want to only apply to colleges with a very small admissions rate. You want to apply to a variety of these things. So maybe some of them have, you have a safety school, which accepts maybe over 40% of their applicants. It's very likely that if you meet their academic and extracurricular kind of criteria, if you fit their profile, that you would be accepted there if they have that high of an admissions rate. You also want to have a number of target schools where your GPA, your test score, your personality profile, and the things that you do are really on target with what they are looking for. But maybe they have a slightly lower acceptance rate. Not too low, but not as high as over 50%. And then you'll have your reach category, which are schools that are very challenging to get into, have less than 15% acceptance rate. These are where your Ivy League schools fall. Most of them have a 4 or 5% acceptance rate. So even if you have perfect grades, perfect scores, you do every extracurricular, there's no guarantee that you would get in, because it is just so selective. So in English, we say, don't put all your eggs into one basket. And you don't want to do that with college either. It means spread out your applications across different types of selectivity so that you maximize your chances of getting accepted to a school that you would be happy at. And they may not be Ivy League schools, all of them. You'll have to consider a range of schools, but that's really the best way to maximize your results and your effort. You should also make sure that you have a good plan in place for putting your applications together. These are quite extensive. Many of them will have more than one essay. There are a lot of materials to gather and people to coordinate with. You've got to ask your teachers for recommendation. Your counselor's got to submit your transcripts. You've got to submit your test scores. You may have additional requirements if you're applying from a country outside of the United States. And there's a lot to do, and each of these pieces takes a lot of time, and so you don't want to rush it. So give yourself several months to write your essays. Usually for juniors, we recommend starting around now to put your school list together and start working on your application so that by the time school starts again in the fall, you may have the majority of your applications finished, and then you can focus on school again. So create a timeline for yourself and a plan, and build some accountability into that so that you can stick to your plan and you don't have to rush things at the last minute. And then you also want to be strategic in your applications. Molly has given you great insight into how your applications are read. So when you are applying and putting your materials together, think about your audience and think about what are they going to take away from this essay that I'm writing? Or what are they going to take away from the order I list my activities in? What does it say about me? So always think about yourself as a stranger might see you. And if all they had was your application, what would they think about you? What kind of person would they think you are? And use that sort of lens to edit or consider what else to add to your application materials. So think like an admissions officer as much as you can. And all of these things, there's much more detail we could go into. This is what Molly and I spend our time doing with students on a one-on-one basis. So in terms of how Signet can help, this is really what it is, right? We can help you understand what colleges are doing with your materials and therefore understand how you should apply, where you should apply, what kind of stories from your own life might be the ones that you want to share with those college admissions officers to put you in the best light possible and put you in the best position possible for acceptance. So we work, as Jay mentioned, one-on-one with students in an hourly fashion or through several different packages that we have in order to get them from start to finish of this entire application process. And now Molly and I are spending time with our students, helping them decide where to go of their multiple acceptances. And it's always a very exciting time for us. And so hopefully we'll see you in this situation next year too. All right, I guess it's time for questions. I'll turn it back to Jay.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Molly. As Sheila said, we could spend all day giving you sort of information about the process and how it goes, but we want to turn to your questions now. We've got a few already from prior to the webinar, and we've got two that have come into the chat. I just want to ask everybody, please put your questions in now. While you're doing that, I'm going to actually kick things off with one question that I know comes up quite often. And this one is, let's say we can start with Molly for this one, but Sheila, please chime in. What is this idea of fit, and how does it compare to just trying to apply to the best schools possible?
Yeah, so fit is a really important part of this process. And the college admissions offices are reading so many applications from year to year that when they review your application, they can pretty readily figure out whether or not you are going to be a good fit for their university. So that's one of those intangibles that doesn't always come into play whenever you're reading about what a college admissions office is using to evaluate you, but they want to make sure that your goals and ambitions match up with the type of school that they are a part of. And so sometimes I'll meet with students and they'll say to me, I think I'm going to apply to all the Ivy League universities. And I'll say, well, let's take a step back, because these are institutions that are all very different from one another. So just looking at the Ivy Leagues as an example, you've got Columbia University in the city of New York, which is much different geographically than Dartmouth, which is located in a more rural part of New Hampshire, not a city at all. And so a student who is really looking for that urban cultural diversity experience is probably not going to be as happy at a rural institution. So that's one of those places where we start, where we talk to them. Are you looking for a school that is more urban? Are you looking for an environment where the campus itself is the experience? And even though that doesn't sound like a big factor, that can really help to start to differentiate which schools are going to be on your list. Another reason to consider a particular university is the fit of majors. You know, not every university out there will offer all of the majors you might be interested in. Now, at this point in time, whether you're an 8th grader or an 11th grader, you might not know exactly what it is that you want to major in. And college students on average will change majors 3 times. But if you're really, really excited about a major in the sciences that will put you on a pre-med track, looking at a school that's maybe not quite as strong in their pre-med preparation might not be the best fit for you. So you want to look at what that pre-med preparation looks like. You want to look at what their admit rate is to medical school. And even if everything else outside of that is a fit, if that area isn't what their forte is, it might not be the best fit for you.
Great, thank you, Molly. So some other really great questions here. So if I have experienced grade drops in late grade 10, early grade 11 in 1 or 2 courses, how can I make up for that on my application? Sheila, why don't you take a first shot at this? And Molly, please chime in if there's anything to add.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So one thing that we should talk about is how admissions officers look at grades. So they are looking at your overall GPA and how you did in specific classes and measuring that against the rigor of the courses that are available in your school. But they are also looking for grade trends. So in holistic admissions, people are generally quite understanding, even at the most selective universities. And if something may have happened, a medical issue, a family issue, a pandemic, for example, they are going to keep that context in mind. And so if there is something in your profile that happened at the end of 10th grade, maybe you are a soccer player and you got a concussion, and that affected your performance in school, that's important to make sure that colleges know about. And there is a section on your application where you can inform them of things like that. So that aside, a grade trend can be very important. It's fairly common for students early in high school to struggle a little bit with their advanced classes. And then hopefully by junior year, they've gotten a hang of things. They have a routine, they have a system for managing their assignments, and their grades start to improve quite a bit. And that's what we call a grade trend. We have grades getting better as you get later in high school. So if you do have some grade drops early in high school, just really focus in on having solid grades in the future years. And if there was some external reason for those grade drops, it's important to let admissions officers know what those are. Of course, you want to be strategic about it because you never want to make it sound like you're making an excuse. So it's usually best to talk to somebody like, Molly or I, and we're happy to answer these questions if there is a specific situation you're thinking of disclosing. But it's also important to consider whether the student is in the right classes for them. If in junior year there are these significant grade drops, it may mean that they are choosing classes that are just too challenging for them, or maybe their extracurricular load is too much and it's causing them to make sacrifices in their performance. So we like to think about these things in terms of the whole student, what's really causing some of that. Oh, Jay, I think you're still sharing your screen. We really like to think about what may be causing the grade drops and then see what we can do specifically to remedy those things, whether it's bring in a tutor or have a change of the classes or something else entirely. Jay, we're no longer looking at the presentation.
Yeah, I'm just switching my screen so I can see the Q&A box. Thank you.
Great. And Molly, if you have anything to add, please feel free.
I think the one thing that I will add is kind of a tangent to that question, but one of the things I hear from students is, would it be better for me to take a more advanced class and maybe not do as well in it, maybe get a B+, or take the easier class and get the A+. And what I would say is that colleges do like to see you challenge yourself and take that risk. And so they would much rather see you take that more rigorous class, maybe not get that perfect grade, but experience something that's really going to push you outside of your comfort zone rather than taking the easy route in the class that you know that you'll get an A+ in perhaps.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. So we're getting a bunch of questions now, which is great. I'm going to choose questions that I think will apply to the group and provide the most value. We'll see how many we get through. If we don't get through all of them, we'll discuss with you and what the best way is to get your questions answered. So the next one here, Molly, what should we do this summer if we have not been accepted into prestigious summer camps?
That is a great question, and one that I know that particularly juniors are struggling with right now. And what I will say is that prestigious summer camps are actually not the best path forward for students to set themselves apart in the admissions process. It's a great opportunity for you to explore a particular interest of yours. Maybe that's an engineering summer camp, and they're talking about mechanical and chemical and civil and what the differences are between them. That's great information for you to have about yourself and what your match might be. But colleges actually prefer when you go out of your way to create a summer experience that's really going to be individually beneficial to you. And so what I mean by that is an opportunity that maybe you craft. You're reaching out to a law firm to talk to them about your particular interests. You're networking with the parents of your friends to see who works at these kind of law firms. You're the one sending out a resume to say, hey, I'd love the opportunity to volunteer or have an internship with you for a few hours over the summer. I have a student right now who's really interested in public health, and he has been taking Spanish throughout school. And so he's reaching out to a local nonprofit that works with a migrant population of families in the area to try and set up an opportunity for him to work as a translator between the migrant families and the clinic, and to be able to get that experience in public health. So think about how you could perhaps combine your own interests over this summer, something that's going to benefit maybe your community if you have the resources to do so, or maybe something that's going to benefit you individually. So that could be something that you've always wanted to do but never had the time. Learning Japanese cooking, picking up another language, reading Machiavelli over the summer and finding a book club where you can try and figure out what the different chapters in Machiavelli actually mean, and then rereading Machiavelli to see it in a different light. This summer is going to be unlike any other summer we've had before. And even though college admissions offices are telling applicants that they won't be looking as closely at summer, this summer really does give you, that sets up an opportunity like this, a chance to stand out and set yourself apart.
Great, thank you, Molly. And to kind of underscore that, the part of what you're describing there is really taking an initiative to pursue a personal interest. And that's something that I think often parents don't realize is valued in college admissions. Very often we're thinking, hey, let's get higher grades, let's get better scores. Students and parents are both thinking this. Let's get into a prestigious camp. But sometimes the most compelling applicants are the ones that have beaten their own path and figured out what they want to do and really made something of that versus, trying to get into an Ivy League summer camp or something like that. So kind of on the heels of that thought, I'll let you both, Sheila, if you could take this one first, but please, I'd love to hear from you both. What recommendations do you have for Asian boys, given that it's really hard for them to be selected by Ivy League schools?
Sure, that is a great question. And I don't think it's just Asian boys. I think it's Asians in general is the perception. And this is a question I actually like to talk about a lot. I am an Asian. I'm a South Asian. It's a slightly different type of Asian, but we, I think, face some of the same stereotypes. And really, I think this is a combination of a couple of things. I won't deny systemic bias in our systems and institutions, but I also think there is a certain mentality that many immigrant families bring to college admissions or to their definition of success that can also be an obstacle to standing out in the college application process. So I'll give you an example from my own my own life with my brother, who is a year older than me, and he is now a doctor and has always wanted to be a doctor. And my parents, in advising him on what he should be doing with his free time and extracurriculars, really told him the things that they thought were important for someone who wanted to do medicine to do. And they ended up being the same things that like everybody else does. So he did, scientific research with the doctor, and he did, shadowing, and he took all the, courses that he was supposed to take. He didn't ever do something that he himself was interested or wanted to do. So at the end of the day, his activity list looked like anybody else. And then it became very hard for him to distinguish himself against other people. And I'll give you the example of myself. I was also a pre-med when I was applying to college because I have South Asian parents. But what I decided I wanted to do was study literature and still go to medical school. So I applied with a major of Near Eastern languages and civilizations. I studied Persian and Arabic poetry. And most of my application was more about my literary interests than about my scientific accomplishments, of which I had many. I made it. I was accepted into Harvard, and I was the only major in my grade, in my class that year. And I am 100% certain that is the only reason I was accepted. And I made the effort to kind of think outside of the box, right? So along the lines of what Molly and Jay were just saying is if students can take initiative to pursue something that is a true interest of theirs, whether or not it is related to their academic or career goals, students stand out and help them not blend into what all the other Asian pre-meds or engineering students are doing. So I think that's very important to consider. What is the mold? Step out of it so that you really stand out in the crowd.
Thank you, Molly. Anything to add there? Distinguishing your...
The one thing that I might add, Sheila did a great job of summing it up, is to drive this point home, is to really think about those summer opportunities. This is with all that free time you have to really find an opportunity to distinguish yourself. And all of the students who are applying to these universities are going to be spending their summers perhaps doing summer work that is required. SATs, ACTs, or SAT2s. So you need to do something that goes above that, beyond that, in order to distinguish yourself. That just is par for the course.
Thank you. And so on the heels of, are some extracurricular activities better than others? That was the question. And what I'll add to that is, how do you choose? It sounds like, Sheila, when you tell your story, if I'm a student, I might say, well, maybe I should find something that there's a major where there's not that many people in, or maybe I should figure out some interests that nobody else has. So maybe Molly, you could take this one first. Are some extracurricular activities better than others? And my addition to that question is, and then how do you choose?
Right. And earlier we talked a little bit about fit and the personality and the whole story of who you are as an individual. And if the evidence leading up to your application to college doesn't indicate a strong interest in literature, then it does look like something that comes out of left field, wherein you're applying to a major simply for the possibility of gaining admittance to the university. So that's something that they can see through very quickly. Now, as a ninth grader coming into high school, you have the opportunity to choose from a lot of different student organizations and clubs at your high school, hopefully. If not, I would certainly encourage you to talk to your student dean or someone along those lines to help create more student organizations that might be a good fit for your particular interests. Now, as a 14-year-old coming into high school, you might not know what those interests are. So it's a really good opportunity to try out a variety of different options, whether that's mock trial or Model UN or the ping pong club. Try them out. And by the time you're a sophomore, you should have a better fit for where you really want to spend your time. Your time is certainly limited, and you don't want to spread yourself too thin. Colleges look at applicants and say that they're well-rounded and they're well lopsided. So both of them are compelling applicants, Well, lopsided is somebody who maybe has a real strong passion for music, and they're in the orchestra. They're in the orchestra pit for the school musical. Maybe they perform at a local nursing home on every Sunday afternoon during dinner. And then maybe there's the well-rounded individual. And this is maybe somebody who does have a passion for sports and service and music and theater, and they do a little bit of everything, and that's perfectly fine. But as you move into that 11th grade and 12th grade year, the colleges are hoping to see that you've picked up some leadership roles within those organizations, that your peers and perhaps your teachers have recognized that you've put in the time and you really understand the impact this organization has on your school or your community, and that you have the potential to then lead that organization. That doesn't mean that you need to be president of your school, but perhaps picking up a treasurer role within an organization, or maybe a captain by the time you're a senior in a particular athletic organization. Sometimes you have an interest that develops as your high school time goes by. Maybe right now, because of the time in quarantine, you found yourself looking at classic movies and you really want to get together with other individuals who have this passion for movies, and you guys can talk about the classics and the underlying meaning. So maybe you want to start that movie club at your school. So think about those opportunities and see how they might fit in with who you are as an individual and your growth, figuring out what your goals are going to be in the future, and try to pursue them as much as you possibly can.
Thank you. Sheila, anything to add to that?
Well, I would just add that I know many of you are not actually going to be applying from within the United States. And I know that different academic systems prioritize or deprioritize extracurricular activities in different ways, and sometimes in ways that are different from how we do things in the United States. So, don't feel yourself at too much of a disadvantage if your school doesn't offer extracurriculars or doesn't prioritize them, because again, you will be considered in the context from which you are applying. At the same time, that doesn't mean you can't take the initiative to find ways to pursue your own interests and hobbies at a higher level in the ways that we've been describing. So I think in those cases, even if there isn't a club you can join at school or start at your school, you could still develop your own interest on your own, join some sort of online book club or film club or whatever it is, in order to further your own interests.
And something I'll add to this is that a lot of times we feel that families and students get the cart before the horse, is how we say it, meaning they focus so much on the admission to college and they try to create themselves in that image that they think is appropriate for that admission to that college, that they miss the whole point and end up having a really stressful or not enjoyable or not valuable time of their education. And in fact, we see mental health as a major challenge for students across any race, ethnicity, background at this point, especially high achieving students. And so what I always encourage families to do is really to think about what the most important thing is: to get a good education, to prepare yourself for success in the world, to develop interests, to grow as a human being. And that's what's going to serve you on the path of building a meaningful life, especially in this kind of context and society that we're in here. And so really, you should be thinking about college and you should be strategic, right? You don't want to put your head in the sand. But at the same time, you really have to be thinking about, how as a student am I going to get a great education? How am I going to learn to pursue things that are interesting to me? Because just like this pandemic is teaching us, our work life is going to look very different in 10, 15, 20 years than it looks now. And the students who are going to be most equipped for success in this changing world are those that can connect with something that's interesting to them, develop a skill, develop a talent, grow that, and then apply that. Not just the people who are going to march to the beat of the drum that they think that they're hearing. So really encourage people to flip that and really try to put the student and the student development at the center of it. And that can be hard sometimes, which is where partners like us come in to help really foster that. It can sometimes also be a hard conversation for parents to have with students, which again is why there's sometimes a third party fostering that can help. Sheila, we've got one for you here, which is about testing. So the question here is, do we have to take both the SAT and ACT? But Sheila, could you please just speak to generally what role does testing play in competitive college admissions?
Sure, yeah, I'll start there. So the National Association of College Admissions Counselors does a survey every year of what's most important to colleges in the various elements of the application. And testing is in the top 4, but it's like number 3. It is not the most important thing in the application. It is important, but not the most. Colleges, as Molly was saying when she was introducing the idea of testing, colleges are looking at your test scores to understand how successful you may be at their college, right? They do all these statistical studies to see what your initial test score was and then what your levels of success, your grades were in their college. And they use historical information to predict forward and evaluate their incoming classes. And what they found is that test scores are not much better of a predictor than grades. And so many colleges in the United States have moved to what we call a test optional position. And in particular, because of the pandemic, many colleges are announcing a test optional policy for the next year or 3 years, given that many test dates have been canceled or interrupted, and there are new testing methods that these testing agencies are about to roll out. So not everyone has to do the SAT or the ACT. Certainly nobody has to do both. When it comes to the question of SAT versus ACT, you should know that the ACT has been the more popular test since 2015 across the world. Many more students take the ACT than the SAT now. In the past, that relationship was switched. And every 4-year college in the United States accepts both tests without any preference between them. So it's in the student's best interest to figure out which test they can do better on if they are applying to a school that requires one of these tests, and then focus on preparation and testing for just that one test. We at Signet do a lot of test prep. And what we recommend starting with is a series of practice tests to get a feel for how the student is going to do on either test, get a sense of what their experience was of the pacing and their stress levels during the test, and then of course their scores from those practice tests to make a comparison and make a recommendation of which test the student should focus on, even when they should test. So if this is something that you are considering or wondering about, please get in touch with us and we can help you through that process. We do most of the diagnostic testing and recommendations for free. So we can clarify that for you on an individual basis.
Thank you, Sheila. You mentioned the things that colleges have reported that they find most important. Mm-hmm. Can you just go over that again, but also explain how that's essentially a survey of a bunch of different colleges, and for different colleges it might be
different levels. Yeah, it's a survey of I think over 400 colleges every year they get, and they get different number of respondents every year, but it's quite a high number, and some of them are highly selective and some of them are not highly selective, so take it with a grain of salt. The top 4 are, the number 1 is the GPA in your advanced classes. The second one is the rigor of your coursework. The third one is your test score. And then the fourth one tends to be either the overall GPA or the essay, depending on the type of school that you're looking at. You know, you can access this report if you Google State of College Admission and then the acronym NACAC, N-A-C-A-C. You'll find their most recent report, and there is a lovely chart that gives you this list and tells you which kinds of schools are responding to their surveys. So, you know, there's a question about SAT subject tests. Usually that's 12 or 13 on the list. It's not even in the top 10 of factors. So it can really help you understand what to prioritize.
Great. We're getting close to time, but I'd like to do one more question. And this one is for you, Molly. One of our attendees asked if you could talk a bit more specifically about how UPenn work, but I'll actually change that question, since I have the power to do so, to ask if you could just reflect on your time at, say, UPenn and one of the other places you've worked, and just kind of do a little comparative analysis for us of how it was similar or different, just so that our audience can truly see how varied the process is and how, in a way, subjective it is. It's not necessarily without logic, but there's a lot of subjective judgment that goes into the application. So if you could just reflect on that for us, please.
Yeah, one of the things I will say in terms of the subjectivity that we as admissions officers would bring to the role is that everybody comes in with their own biases. You know, I was a high school and collegiate athlete, so when I would read through an application from a swimmer or a baseball player, I automatically knew how many hours per week that student was dedicating to this particular sport. And when I started off in the field, I was not as familiar with the cellist and how many hours per week they were dedicating. And so we all have to work together as a team in the admissions office to make sure that we all are aware of our strengths and our weaknesses. And so we work very closely together to figure out who we can rely on to really weed through some of these various activities that maybe we hadn't grown up doing, because we are all coming to this as generalists in that particular role, and trying to figure out what we think in that particular moment on that particular day is going to benefit the university. And so, you know, this is a very human process. And oftentimes when we start reading applications back in November, we're really excited to read the essay from that really interesting boy that we met at that information session back in August. But by the time February rolls around, we have to work really hard to continue to get that excitement as we proceed to read through those hundreds of applications, because 5 months has gone by, and just by the nature of what our daily lives entail in the world of admissions, it gets to be a little bit less exciting. So we all have to work together in that committee format to try and bring that excitement to the job every day. What I will say is that, you know, when I worked in admissions at Penn, there was always a dean or an associate dean leading the admissions committee. And then at another university I worked at, it was the entire staff there. And we all together as a team worked through each of those individual applications. So at Oberlin, it wasn't a consensus agreement in any way, but it was more of a conversation from 14 or 15 different individuals at the table, all bringing their various contributions and questions about the applicant. So it sometimes can take 20 to 30 minutes to make a decision on an application, because we are all very invested in each of these various spots that these students will take up, and then how they will contribute to our universities.
Great, thank you, Molly. Any last question or any last comments from either of you, Sheila or Molly, before we wrap up?
One thing that I will say is that I hope you have a little bit of fun with this process. Oftentimes what I hear from students after they've gone through it, after they've been admitted and they've enrolled and that stress has kind of rolled off their shoulders, is they look back on it and they say, you know what? That was actually kind of fun. I learned a lot about myself. I got to spend some time with my parents that I don't normally spend with them, whether that's visiting colleges and universities or sitting down every Sunday for a few hours to talk through how a student is feeling. But at the end of the day, they come out of this process feeling really refreshed and excited about the possibilities ahead. So I hope that that will happen for all of you, whether you're an 8th grader or a junior.
Thanks, Molly.
My final comment actually is related to this question that we just got about if you've been rejected from a summer program, would that impact the later university application? One of the things I talk to my students a lot about is a scarcity mindset versus a mindset of abundance. And a scarcity mindset is one where you're thinking about all the things you didn't do, all the things that are missing from your life, or this idea that if this person has it and I don't, I'm going to look bad. Right? An abundance mindset really focuses on your own strengths and your own blessings, let's call them, and your own talents. It's much more important for college admissions officers to see what you do with those things than to think about what you could have done and then what you didn't do and what this next person did, right? So I really encourage that, and that mindset often flows straight from the parents into the students, right? So parents, you can start to cultivate this mindset of abundance of, look at all these amazing things my student is interested in, or their talents and their great friendships, and how can I foster those things so that we can build from that place forward instead of always comparing to something else or thinking about what they could have done but didn't. So no college is going to know that you applied to a summer program that you didn't get into. So it really doesn't matter if they've been rejected. What matters is how that student continues on. How do they handle that rejection? What do they do with their summer instead? And what do they do in future years? So rejections really don't matter.
Great, thank you. And so, Yun, I'll turn it back to you. But before doing so, I just want to encourage all of you to, continue to get good, high quality, valuable information about this process. We've got some great newsletters. You can email Yun, and she can get you onto one of our newsletters. They're not promotional. They're just every week from 9th through 12th grade. We send out a newsletter to parents to just help them understand what to be thinking about. So it's as if you could talk to us once a week. It's what we would share with you. So over 9th grade, it's really bigger picture, study skills, study habits. But as we get into 10th and 11th grade, we're really getting into tactics and specifics. So really encourage you. You can, again, email Yun and she'll make sure you get signed up. Email her with your name and your grade. And for those of you who are interested in working with Molly or Sheila or somebody like them, I'm not sure if, I know they're quite busy, so I don't know how available they'll be, but we have several people on our team like them. Again, email Yun and she can give you some more information and help you connect with us. And lastly, Yun, you and I can chat afterwards to see if there's some way to get, there's some great questions here. We just didn't have time to get to all of them. Maybe there's some way, I can't promise anything, but maybe there's some way we can follow up with some information on some of these questions.
Sure, yeah, we'll do that, yeah. So everybody, again, if you have any question or any comments, you can email me. You can see my email here on the slides here. Okay, you can email me anytime with any question you have. And again, if you want to ask me in Mandarin, I can help you with connect with our consultants here. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. 非常感谢大家。如果有任何问题的话，可以随时来联系我们。我的 email 地址在这个 PPT 上面，大家可以记下来。有需要随时可以 email 我们。Again, thank you very much. That's the end of our webinar, I guess. All right. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.